Selected. Main record.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Bringing Light to Blindness. I am so sorry that it's been such a long time since I've posted an episode, but I haven't really done much since I came back from Colorado. I am back home in South Carolina, back with my family, and I also have an exciting announcement for anyone who has an iPhone, iPod, or anything Apple. This podcast is now on iTunes, so I'm very excited about that. Make sure to tell all your friends, write a review. And on today's episode, we are actually going to be exploring how blind people cook. And today I'm going to be cooking spaghetti. So I'm going to start by browning the ground beef. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And I've got everything that I need out here on the counter in front of the toaster in order to make spaghetti. So I'm going to look for my pot. Here it is. And I'm going to use the front right burner. The type of stove that I'm using is a gas stove. So I'm going to be using that. Oh, I didn't realize there were two pots out here. So I'm going to go ahead and brown the beef. And we'll get started right away. Oh, duh. I looked in the fridge. It's at the freezer. It's actually in the fridge. Alright, so I've got my ground beef here, and there's a few ways that you can open it. I tend to use a knife, just because sometimes it can be hard to... Well, actually, let's try it this way. Oh, wow, I got it. Okay, so even though it's probably less messy to use a knife, I actually use my fingernails to open it. So I'm going to dump this in the pot and then go ahead and break it up. And, for blind people, the best way to cook is by using your hands, because obviously you can't use your eyes. So you have to be prepared to get your hands dirty. So I've got this in the pot, and now I'm just going to break it up, and then I'm going to turn on the stove and start cooking it. And you may be wondering, for those of you who are sighted, or even those of you who are blind, how does a blind person tell when meat is brown? And you can tell that because... Oh, sorry, I'm just rinsing my hands off. You can tell that it's brown because it'll feel firm and crumbly, and it won't feel as gooey when you put the spoon in it. So, as I said before, we've got our ground beef, and I'm going to go ahead and start breaking it up, which I probably shouldn't have, well, I don't know. I probably shouldn't have rinsed my hands off since I'm putting my hands in the pot anyway. But, oh well. So, here we go, breaking this up. And when I'm cooking, I like to use a lean type of ground beef because you don't have to drain it. So I'm just breaking this up here. And then once we've done that, I will start the gas stove. Yeah, I remember when I cooked my meal for about 60 people when I was in Colorado, and that was quite an experience for me. But, it was kind of fun for me because I put on some music, and I listened to Disney and film scores and, anything I could find. And that's, music really does help you get through something that can be stressful. I actually found the cooking experience kind of fun because I never really realized how much I liked cooking until I started actually doing it. In high school I was so focused on academics and getting through the days and studying and all that other stuff. So I've got that done, and now I'm just going to wash my hands, because it's always important to wash your hands after you've been messing with the ground beef. There we go. So, and actually, I don't even need to put the lid on this. So, all right. Now I'm going to turn on the gas. And the easiest, and I'm actually using the front right burner. You can tell which burner is which because they're kind of separated. And also, when using a flat top, you can also tell where the burners are because the texture is different on the burners than it is in between the eyes of the stove. So now I'm going to start this up. You'll hear a clicking sound, and that's just me turning on the stove. There we go. And I'm going to put this on a pretty high temperature, and I'm going to reach back and grab a ladle that I can use to cook the meat. Here we go. And now I'm just going to make sure that this pot is centered, and you know I can tell because the flame will be right over the pot. So it's already started cooking, so I'm just going to yeah, it looks good. I have it set on high, and our stove's kind of weird because generally you want to make sure that generally the stove works, well, all stoves are different. It can work clockwise, counterclockwise. So I'm going to go ahead and brown the meat. And I'm kind of just taking the spoon and poking it into the meat, kind of stirring it around. Whew, that flame is hot. And you don't have to stir it constantly, but you do want to make sure that you're moving the meat around so that it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pot. And, ooh, that flame is hot. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. I mean, we want it to cook, but not too fast. And once again, you'll be able to tell when it's done if you're blind because it'll feel firm and not as gooey. So it's got a while to cook, about 10 or 15 minutes. Ooh. I'm actually going to grab a trivet because the pot handle is metal, and metal tends to get really hot when you're on the stove. So I'm going to find where the pot is, and now I'm just going to use this trivet here to hold the handle since it's getting kind of hot. Hot, hot, hot.
Main share. Dimmed. Button.
Like I said, you want to make sure you go all the way around the pot with the ladle, so that all of your meat cooks through. And after we ground the beef, I'm going to go ahead and start making the sauce. And I tend to do better at cooking on the stove than I do with baking, just because, it's more what I'm used to, though I have done a lot of baking. I remember one time in Colorado, sometimes, as I mentioned in an earlier podcast episode, we will get together in small groups, and so I did that once with a group of my fellow students, and we just randomly decided, hey, let's cook some chicken and rice and biscuits and maybe even make a pie for dessert. So we did, and it turned out very well. You got to be more careful on a gas stove than you do with an electric stove, just because, as there's a flame and it kind of tends to flare up when you light it, so it can be tricky sometimes. So it seems to be coming along pretty well. It still feels kind of gooey, so it's still got a ways to go. But other than that, it's doing pretty well. So I'm gonna move the temperature up just a tiny bit. Like I said, you don't want to overcook it, but it would almost be better if you overcooked it rather than undercooked it, because that you're going to have problems if it's undercooked. So I'm just going around the pot with the ladle. Oh, that would not have been good. And once it's cooked, I'm going to turn down the heat, and then I'm going to add the stuff for the sauce. So I'm going to add it to the ground beef. I think that would be the easiest way. And then I'll cook the noodles when the rest of my family gets home, because I'm cooking dinner for the family tonight. So hope it turns out all right. And honestly, we don't really need to cook this all the way through, because even though you turn down the heat, it's still going to cook after you add the sauce. So I might turn this down a little earlier than I would if I was grounding beef for maybe a casserole or something else. Let's see, it's kind of sticking to the pot, which we don't want, so I'm just moving it around. And you can also, another way to make sure that the ground beef is done is to take your spoon out of your pot and kind of just barely touch, make sure you've got some meat on the spoon, and then just barely touch the meat. And then if it feels like it's, if it feels crumbly and brown and, and firm, that means that it's done. You don't have to do it that way, but it's just a way to do it if you want to make absolutely sure that it's cooked all the way through. So it looks like this may be done pretty soon. So I'm just going to stir this around one last time, and here we go. Yeah, it feels like it's just about done. So I'm actually going to just tapping my spoon to get the meat off of it. So now I'm going to turn this down. I'm going to put this on medium. And then it'll be time to add the sauce. So I'm going to set this trivet off to the side. And actually, there might be a, let's see, I need a spoon rest. Oh, okay, this will work. So I've got a my spoon, and I'm going to put it in the spoon rest, like so. And now I'll go and get the stuff for the sauce. So, let's see. Here we go. So I'm going to use this can of tomato sauce, and then I'm going to add the jar of tomatoes into the pot. And I should have thought of this, but I'm wondering if this pot's going to be big enough. I think it'll be fine. Alright, so I'm just opening the can of sauce. I'm going to make sure that lid's all the way off. Okay. There we go. And I'm also going to add some salt and pepper. And, I don't really like much pepper, so maybe I'll just add salt.
Twitter notification. Twitter. Add NASA.
And so I'm going to find, once again,
button.
I'm going to find my trivet and use that as a guide to tell where the pot is, because I would rather not dump it in the stove burners or on the floor. So I found it. I'm going to pour this into the pot and then stir it in. And I'm actually surprised that I didn't hear it sizzle, because normally when you add liquid to meat, sometimes it sizzles. Well, we got a little bit of a sizzle, so I'm going to set that to the side, grab my spoon, and give it a good stir.
Selected. Main record. Button.
There we go. Da, 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 da. Oh, there's the trivet, and then I might actually put the lid on this once we have the sauce going with the meat, because I think it would be better. And then I'm going to put it on, I'm going to switch it from medium to low. And actually, I might not even add salt and pepper, because I know some people like it salty, some don't. My mom likes a lot of salt. I mean, she loves salt. So I've got my temperature on medium heat now, and I'm just stirring in the tomato sauce that I've added. Once again, making sure that nothing's sticking to the pot. It looks like we're good. And now that that's done, I'm going to put my spoon back and go and get the tomatoes. And I didn't think about this, but it's generally a good idea to have all of your ingredients next to you. And, well, I guess mine are kind of next to me. They're just a little further down the counter. So, I've got my tomatoes here. And I'm going to open this up if I can. There we go. Those jars can be tough sometimes. And actually, I'm going to be really, really careful about
dim,
this
button,
because...
dim,
oh,
button.
be quiet. Because I don't want to overflow the pot, because that would be bad, and I really don't feel like cleaning up more than I have to. So, I'm gonna carefully pour this. Okay, that could be bad too. I'm gonna do this a little bit at a time because, like I said, I don't want to clean up more than I have to. So I'm just making sure I know where the edge of the pot is and so now I'm going to make sure that the pot's not overflowing, because once again that would be bad.
Main share, dim, button.
To the side. And it looks like so far it's alright. And I don't even need the trivet anymore because it's not as hot as it was. Oh, never mind. Never mind, the handle's still hot. So, I guess I could have used an oven mitt for this, but I don't really like doing that on the stove because then it's not as easy to feel what you're doing. So, I'm stirring part of this in, making sure once again that the pot is not overflowing, which so far we're good. And like I said, I'm just going to add this gradually, a little bit at a time, so that it doesn't overflow the pot. It's funny, I'm sort of used to doing this in sleep shades, but I'm glad I don't have to anymore. There we go. Now I'll add another little bit.
Main share, dim, button.
Oh, what did I do with it? Another way that you can tell where the burners of the stove are and to tell if your pot is centered on the stove or not is by taking your spoon that you're cooking with and feeling around and making sure that the pot is centered that way. So once again, I've got my jar. I'm going to use...
Main share, dim, button.
Oh, I probably shouldn't have kept my phone in my pocket. But anyway, I'm using my spoon to tell where the pot is in relation to where the jar is.
Selected. Main record, button.
And... there we go. We got some more tomatoes in there. Set that down away from the stove. Grab my trivet. It looks like we're good so far. And I'm pouring in, and what I did was I poured the can of tomato sauce in there, and I'm also adding some chunky garden tomatoes. My dad can probably do this a lot better than I can, but anyway. I'm still cooking it on medium heat. I've got maybe half the jar of tomatoes in here, and I'm just stirring it up all together. There we go. This is actually the first time I've made homemade spaghetti by myself, so I'm excited about this. I really hope it turns out well. I think we're okay to pour a little more into the pot. So I'm going to find my spoon rest. There we go. Grab the jar.
Main import. Button.
There we go. Bear with me, folks. I'm
Main share. Dim. Button.
like I said, I'm trying to
31.
make sure I do this
Selected.
a little bit at a time so that I don't overflow the pot. Oh, where did my trivet go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Oh, here it is. This is kind of an awkward stove too, just because it sticks out from the counter, kind of sticks out from the rest of the counter, which is a good indication of where it is, but it also has its disadvantages. You know, it's harder to maneuver around that kind of stove, but you know, it's all right. All right, it looks like we have got, there we go. I'm just trying to use the spoon to make sure I've got it all in there. And then I'm just gonna, there we go. And that does it for the tomatoes. So that's good. We managed to get it all in the pot without making a mess. At least not that I can tell. I don't hear anything boiling or bubbling or smell anything burning, so I think it turned out all right. So I'm just going to stir all this in, and then I'm going to turn the heat down to low and put the lid on and let it simmer for a while. And I'm actually going to cook the noodles closer to when it's time to serve it, just so that I make sure that I don't have it ready too early. So, looks like everything's stirred in here fine. So, I'm going to set my spoon aside and put the lid on the pot and turn the temperature down. There we go. So, let's see. Okay, there we go. Now I'm just going to turn this down to low. I'm actually going to put this on medium-low. I think that would be better. That way it cooks, but it doesn't burn. So now I'm just going to leave that to simmer and put my hot pad aside, and I'm going to stir it occasionally. There we go. Going to make sure I rinse these jars and cans out. I know a lot of people like to do this because it makes sure that you don't take up space on the counters that you might need later. I like to clean up as I go along. I find that to be the easiest thing to do. So I'm just, as I said, I'm just rinsing out the can and the jar that the stuff of the sauce was in, putting it to the recycle. There we go. And this is actually similar to when I made chili mac, which is sort of like beefaroni. It has macaroni noodles and cheese and hamburger meat, and it's really good. It's I made it a lot with my roommate Vika. And it turned out really well. Even though I'm not the best at it, I do love to bake. I like to bake cake and cookies, and I remember I have a recipe for yellow cake that I tried out twice, and both times it didn't really turn out exactly the way that I wanted it to, but that's okay. I think I'm going to try it again eventually and try to make the recipe work, because I really do want to. I've never made a homemade cake before, so it's really awesome. Alright, so I've got that. Making sure I didn't leave anything else here. And after I finish cleaning up here, I'm gonna give this pot a stir and see if there's anything else we need to do with it. So, as I did before, I'm using my trivet to feel my hot pad, as some call it, to feel where the lid is so that I don't burn myself on the burner. Now I'm going to stir it up here. It smells pretty good. If I'm not doing this the exact way that it should be done. Well, then again, I don't know if there's an actual method to it or not. So, I'm going to give it a stir. Nothing sticking to the pot, so it looks like we're good. There we go, and now I'm going to cut it down to low, because it looks like, I don't know, it smells pretty good, and, you know, I want to make sure that the meat and the sauce are all blended together, kind of. So, what do I do with, it's on the other burner. Alright, so I'm going to put this lid back on, adjust the temperature.
Selected. Main record. Button.
There we go. And I also like the hot pads because that way, I mean, you could use the spoon to do it too, but I find it sometimes more effective to use the hot pad to tell where the knobs are on the stove, so that, you know, once again, you don't want to get burned. And I actually have my stove marked. I have braille dots on where the low, the medium, and the high are, but you don't necessarily have to do that with your stove, as long as you know which way is high and which way is low. And so, honestly, if my braille dots came off of my stove now, I would be okay, because I would still be able to tell which is medium and which is low and which is high. And you can also do that with any stove. You know, you can also tell by the heat, because obviously when it's higher, the flame, or the heat coming from an electric stove, if you have one, is, it'll be a lot hotter when it's high, as opposed to not so hot when it's low. So heat is a really good indication to tell what level that you have it on. So you don't necessarily have to mark your stove if you're a visually impaired person. So I think I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording because the meat and the sauce are just simmering right now, and actually I might turn them off in a little while. So I think I'm going to pause the recording, and when it's time for me to cook the noodles, I will start recording again.
Main share. Main import. Selected. Selected. Main record.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. As I stated earlier, I had started the recording because I'm getting ready to make the noodles. So I'm going to go ahead and fill up this pot, and then we'll get to it. So I've got the pot here, and now I'm just going to bring it over to the stove, and we'll start boiling the water. And I've got to be careful because the sauce has been turned back on. I guess I didn't simmer it long enough, so it's just being heated back up. So I'm actually going to use the front left burner for the noodles. So here we go. Oh, jeez. Yeah, that's the trouble with this left burner, is that sometimes it takes a while for it to coax a spark out of it. Okay. Third time's a charm. Or not. Okay, there we go. So now I'm just going to let this water start boiling. I'm going to bring the noodles over. Alright, and the thing about the way a blind person would cook noodles is I'm actually going to grab a slotted spoon from back here. If I can find one. Here's one. And normally when you cook the noodles, the best way to tell that they're done is by taking a noodle on the spoon and by actually tasting one of the noodles, and that's how you tell if it's al dente. So now it's just a matter of waiting for the water to boil. It might take a while, but then again, this burner's powerful, so maybe not. And I don't think, like I said earlier, I don't think I'm going to add any seasonings to the noodles because, some people like it salty, some don't, some like pepper. So I'm just going to let everybody get this type of seasoning that they want. That way they can use as much as they want or as little as they want. And in the meantime, I'm gonna untape this box of noodles here. So, there we go. And actually, I'm gonna save this tape for later, so I'm just gonna wrap it around my finger, so when I've added as much noodles as I want on there, I'll just stick it back on. It's funny, one time we were boiling water, and my roommate Vika said that one of her teachers put it, when I was boiling water once, she suggested that I wait until the water sounds angry. So I always think of her when I'm boiling water. It's funny. I'm going to get my hot pad out again, 'cause that way I know where the pot is. Hey, Dad?
Yeah.
Should I put the lid on this pot so that it boils faster?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I will do that. Where'd I put the lid? Oh, Dad, I also put a spoon here if you want to use it to stir the sauce. Okay, maybe not. Let's see. Okay. All right, and once again, I'm just going to use my spoon to indicate where the pot is. There we go. Now we'll just wait for it to boil, and then we'll add the noodles. In other news, if anybody has any ideas of episodes that they want me to do in the future, just write a comment, or I'm on Facebook, and I'm also on Twitter at Voyager2264, and it's the same names for both. If you want to look me up, just be sure to mention who you are. Otherwise, because it's not a good idea to accept people that you don't know. So you can also send me an email at Voyager2264@gmail.com. Just make sure that you include a subject, mention who you are. Otherwise, I won't read it. So you can always feel free to send me an email or find me on Facebook or Twitter and post any questions that you might have. And I think I'm actually going to pause the recording again because you know what they say, a watched pot never boils. So I'm going to...
Open camera. Button.
Oh, that's
Selected.
funny.
Main
I
record.
didn't realize that you could lock your phone while you're doing this. I'm actually going to start doing that.
Selected. Main import. Selected. Main record. Selected. Main record.
Alright guys, it sounds
Screen
like
lock.
it is boiling now, so I'm going to check it out. I'm going to take the lid off here and see what we got. Seems like it's almost to a boil. Oh, that one's hot. I'm going to put it upside down on the counter and then... Okay, note to self, use the hot pad next time. And I'm going to go ahead and add these noodles. I'm going to add them a little at a time so that I don't make a mess. Use the spoon to tell where the pot is. And that sound you heard was just the noodles clinking against the pot. They'll eventually break from the steam and then go further down into the pot. Oh, well, I dropped that. Here we go. You can also tell where the edge of the pot is in relation to where you're putting the noodles with the tip of the noodles, but I don't typically like to do that because the spoon just, I think, gives you a better feel. Alright, so there we go. And you can also use the edge of the spoon to kind of push them down into the pot. And I'm going to cook these until they're al dente. That's just this where the noodles are going into the pot and the steam. And I'm actually going to turn these down, I think. I'm actually going to put this on medium low. There we go. Okay, I'm going to get the hot pad out again. Flame tends to be pretty hot on this stove. Let's see. And for my first time making homemade spaghetti, this smells pretty good. So I'm excited to see how it turns out. Of course, that's the initial feelings that I get when I'm cooking. At first I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, I'm trying out a new recipe. And then as it's in progress, I'm also thinking, oh, well, I hope it's edible. Hope it turns out all right. And like I said, when I'm making sure the noodles are done, I'm gonna take a noodle out of the pot and onto the spoon, and I'm just gonna taste it to make sure it's to the tooth. And other than that, that's pretty much all that I have left to do to make this. Aside from combining everything together. But anyway, that just about wraps up today's podcast, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and I look forward to broadcasting to you next week. So until then, I hope you have a wonderful week, and thanks for watching.
Open camera. Unlock. Button.
Oh, let me see. There we go.
Selected. Opinion. Main record.